How do you stay sane when your own wife lies beside you on the couch, swiping through Tinder dates in front of your face, then tells everyone you are insecure for not finding it funny? What happens when her little jealousy game spills from your sofa to your workplace, your in-laws' dinner table, even your child's school, while you stay calm and quietly build a folder instead of a fight? Why does the boring man she mocked for being loyal walk into a courthouse lobby with nothing in his hands but walk out with every line of her game written into legal orders? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Corin Hale, and until a few months ago I believed that being a good partner meant showing up, paying the bills on time, remembering school events, and staying faithful without turning it into a speech every night. But lately that simple idea has started to feel like something only I still believe in. I am 35 years old, I work in IT support for a mid-sized company, and most people would probably describe me as quiet, reliable, and a little too serious. Which is another way of saying I am not the kind of man who enjoys games around loyalty. That evening, I came home from work with a tired head and a plastic bag of takeaway because Talia had texted that she was too exhausted from the studio to cook. Our apartment smelled like the candle she always lit after a shower, something with vanilla and smoke, and the television in the living room played some loud show I did not recognize. I set the food on the kitchen counter, called out that dinner was ready, and she called back that she would be there in a sec, her voice coming from the couch. When I walked into the living room with 2 plates, she was lying sideways on the sofa with her legs over the arm, the remote on her chest, and her phone in her hand. Instead of opening the streaming app, she had Tinder on the screen, the bright red icons almost glowing in the dim light. As I sat down on the other end of the couch, she casually swiped left on one profile, then right on another, reading parts of them aloud like jokes from a magazine. She said that this one looked like he lived in the gym, that one needed to learn what a shirt was, and another sounded like he had copied his bio from a bad movie. I watched her thumb move, the small motion that carried so much weight, and I tried to laugh it off at first, to take it as a strange kind of mood. I asked, in a calm voice, why she was using Tinder when we were sitting together in our apartment, and she said that she was just playing, that it was only an app, that I should relax and stop acting like a jealous teenager. She told me she liked to see what kind of people were out there, that it made her feel powerful, and that I should be happy she still chose to sit next to me while she did it. The words landed like small cuts. I took a breath and said I was not afraid of people out there, that what hurt was watching my own girlfriend swipe on other men in front of me, but she waved it away and rolled onto her back, her head now resting in my lap as if nothing serious had just been said. With her head there, she tilted the phone up and opened a group chat called Chaos Squad, took a screenshot of her Tinder screen, and typed a message about testing my boyfriend's jealousy level in live mode. I saw my own knee in the bottom corner of the screenshot, proof that she had not even tried to hide the situation. Little bubbles popped up in the chat. One friend replied with a string of laughing faces and asked if I was crying yet. Another wrote that I should be grateful she was still swiping in front of me instead of behind my back. Talia laughed and read the comments out loud in a light, mocking tone, as if my discomfort were part of the entertainment. I told her in a low voice that I did not like being turned into content, that I was not a character in a group joke, but she said that if I had nothing to hide, I should not be so scared of a phone screen. After a few more minutes, she sat up, grabbed her plate from the coffee table, and walked to the kitchen with her phone pressed between her shoulder and her ear, calling her mother before I could say anything else. I followed slowly, carrying my own plate, and stood at the counter while the call rang. When Marla answered, Talia put the call on speaker so she could eat and talk at the same time, and in less than a minute, my name came up. She told her mother that I was losing it because she had opened Tinder on the couch, that I could not handle a little fun, that I was acting like marriage police even though we were only married on paper and not in spirit. Marla's voice came through loud and sharp, saying that jealousy meant I still cared, that men like me should count their blessings if a woman like Talia stayed at all, and that modern women did not have to bury their curiosity just because one man got nervous. She said that if I trusted Talia, I would not be threatened by strangers in an app, and that maybe my fear showed I knew I could not compete. I stood at the sink, plate in my hands, listening to my own relationship explained like a game show to an audience of one, and I realized that, in their story, my pain was just more proof that I was small. When the call ended, Talia told her mother she would send screenshots later, and then hung up without looking at me. She took her plate to the bedroom, said she was tired of heavy vibes, and closed the door behind her with a firm, final click that echoed in the quiet apartment. I stayed in the kitchen, staring at the closed door for a few seconds, then washed my plate slowly, letting the warm water run over my fingers until the noise calmed me a little. After that, I went to the small desk in the corner of the living room where I usually checked work emails in the evening and opened my laptop. The familiar startup sound felt like a small anchor. On the desktop, I created a new folder and named it Archive A, using the same plain naming style I used for my work files. I picked up my phone, opened the recent apps, and found Tinder still sitting there in the background, frozen on a screen full of faces and names. I took a photo of that screen, not to share with anyone, but to keep for myself. Then I opened my Notes app and started a simple spreadsheet on the computer with 3 columns, date, event, and notes. In the first row, under date, I typed today's date. Under event, I wrote Tinder swiping on couch in front of me. Under notes, I wrote Group Chat Chaos Squad. Call to Marla, framed as joke. There was nothing dramatic in the text, just facts. I saved the file into Archive A and closed the lid halfway, letting the screen glow dimly against the dark room. My phone lay on the desk beside the laptop, screen down, still set to vibrate from the day. As I reached for it to put it on the charger, it buzzed softly against the wood, and the screen lit up. A text preview slid across the top from the contact I had saved with only a lock emoji instead of a name, the first words saying that we should talk about this, that Riverfront Cafe at 3:30 in the afternoon would still work if I was ready to meet. I watched the preview without opening the full message, then cleared it from the screen and turned the phone face down again. In the hallway, the bedroom door stayed shut, the latch already set, and for a long moment I sat at the desk between that closed door and the quiet glow of Archive A, aware that a small line had been drawn in my life, even if no one but me could see it yet. The next morning at the office, the open plan floor felt louder than usual, even though the same hum of keyboards and printers filled the air. I walked to my desk with my laptop bag over my shoulder, nodding to coworkers the way I always did, and sat down in my usual corner near the windows. For a little while, things seemed normal. I answered help tickets, reset passwords, and wrote an email about a server update. Then I noticed 2 people near the coffee machine glancing at me, then at a phone, then back at me again with the uneasy look of people who had seen something they wished they had not. One of them walked over a few minutes later with his mug and said in a careful tone that there was a video online I should probably know about, that he did not want me to be blindsided. He held his phone so I could see without touching it. On the screen, a TikTok clip played. The caption said that this was what happened when a boyfriend cried every time someone used Tinder in front of him, and the video showed a quick shot of a male figure on a couch with his hands raised in a defensive gesture, while a hand in the foreground swiped on a phone. The face of the man was blurred, but the shape of the room, the color of the couch, and even the pattern of the cushion behind his head were the same as in our living room. Talia's username sat clearly at the top, with a description about testing jealousy levels and not being controlled by insecure men. In the comments, people laughed, wrote that men like that were lucky anyone swiped near them at all, and one username I recognized as Marla's had added a line about her daughter needing a stronger partner. I watched the clip once, then told my coworker that I appreciated the warning, that I would take care of it, and he nodded, clearly relieved that I had not shouted or broken the phone in his hand. Soon after, a message popped up in my email, marked as important. It was from Ms. Patel, the HR manager, asking if I could come by for a short conversation about online content involving a staff member. The words felt cold, even though they were polite. I walked down the corridor to the HR room, past rows of desks where people suddenly seemed very busy with their screens, and knocked softly on her door. Inside, she had a printout of my profile picture from our internal system and her computer screen open to the TikTok. She said that she understood personal lives could be messy, that social media sometimes blurred lines, but that when content seemed to involve an employee and was public, it became a workplace issue. She asked if I was okay, said that being mocked online by someone close to you could be very painful, and added that if parents or clients started tying this drama to the company, we would have a problem. I told her, in a steady voice, that my girlfriend liked to present our conflicts as jokes on the internet, that I had not agreed to this, that I did not run her account, and that I was doing my best to keep my side calm. I said that I wanted to avoid dragging the company into anything, that I would not respond publicly, and that I was already setting clearer boundaries at home. She nodded, said that there would be no formal action for now, but that she wanted me to understand how important it was to protect my professional image. She suggested that I talk to someone I trusted about what was happening, that I document anything that felt like harassment, and that I consider whether this situation was safe for me and for any children in the home. Her choice of words sat in my mind long after I left the room. Back at my desk, I opened my own laptop rather than my work machine during my lunch break. I went straight to Archive A, created a new subfolder with today's date, and used my phone to take screenshots of the TikTok, the caption, and the top comments. I saved them all, making sure Marla's username and words were clear. Then I opened the spreadsheet I had started and added a new line. Date, TikTok about boyfriend crying over Tinder, coworkers saw it, HR expressed concern. Under notes, I wrote that a parent might complain if the video spread further. When I saved the file, I felt a strange mix of shame and relief, because at least now the humiliation had somewhere to go that was not just my body. After work, I stopped at the supermarket to pick up groceries because Talia had sent a message about needing things for dinner. She was waiting near the entrance, scrolling on her phone, and as soon as I reached her, I saw the familiar red icon on the screen. She said that she had posted a new clip earlier and that it was doing well, that people loved content about insecure men. She did not say my name, but her eyes told me she knew I had seen it. Inside the store, as we moved down the aisles, she kept her phone in one hand, pushing the cart with the other, checking Tinder notifications between cans and boxes. At the checkout, when the line grew behind us, she told the cashier in a bright voice that she was running a social experiment on how much jealousy a man could handle, that I had failed the test so far, but might improve if he understood that Tinder was just an app. A couple behind us smiled awkwardly, the cashier looked uncomfortable, and I felt my face grow warm. I said only that I preferred to talk about it at home, not in a supermarket line, and she rolled her eyes and told the people around us that some men could not take a joke. I did not answer, because every answer would have added another line to her story. In the parking lot, she walked ahead with the bags, phone still open in her hand. I loaded everything into the car and drove us home with the radio turned low, more for the noise than for the music. At the apartment, she disappeared into the bedroom with her phone and closed the door lightly, not in anger, but in dismissal. I stood in the kitchen for a moment, then went to my small desk again. The thin binder labeled Household lay near the edge, slightly fuller now with bills and notes. I set it straight, opened my laptop, and checked that the new TikTok screenshots were backed up in Archive A. Then I added a few more lines to the spreadsheet, noting that HR had spoken to me, that the company had concerns, that public content now touched my job. My phone buzzed on the desk. For a second I thought it was the lock emoji contact again, but this time it was an email notification from Ms. Patel. The subject line said that a parent had mentioned seeing the TikTok and had asked about internal policy, and that she would like to talk with me again soon about how to respond. I did not open the full message yet. I just watched the preview fade from the screen while the apartment grew quiet around me, aware that my private humiliation had walked into my workplace and knocked on the front door. The club sat in a narrow street behind the main road, a box of dark windows and colored lights pulsing behind a black door, and as I stood outside with my hands in my pockets, I wondered why I had agreed to come. Talia had said that it would be good for us, that I needed to prove I was not as stiff as she told her friends, that I should see her world instead of hiding in ours. I had told myself that maybe if I showed up, danced a little, laughed a little, she would lose interest in using Tinder as a toy between us. Inside, the music was loud enough to press against my chest. Lights cut through the room in sharp colors, and people swayed close together in patches of movement. Talia met me near the entrance, already in motion, already glowing with the kind of energy I seemed to lose by that time of night. She grabbed my wrist and pulled me toward the bar, then toward the dance floor, then back to a high table where her friends stood with drinks in hand. I tried to follow her rhythm, to move without thinking too much about how I looked, but I could feel eyes on me in a way I did not like. For a while, things were almost normal. We danced, she laughed. I tried to remember that we had once met in a place like this and that it had felt exciting then. But when we stopped to rest at the high table, when my breathing finally slowed, she slipped her phone out of her bag and opened Tinder as if she were checking the time. One of her friends leaned in and asked if the experiment was still going, and Talia said that it absolutely was, that I had failed the couch test, but she wanted to know if I could handle it in public. She sat half on my knee, her back against my chest, and held the phone where both her friends and I could see it. She swiped left and right, laughing at profiles, reading little pieces aloud, pointing out muscles, tattoos, badly written bios. When I shifted under her, uncomfortable, she told the group that I was already getting tense, that I did not understand that this was social research, not cheating. Someone held up another phone and recorded a short clip of her swiping with my face barely visible in the background, as if I were a piece of furniture. Then, as if the evening needed one more knife, a profile appeared with a familiar face. It was Jax, the personal trainer from the studio where Talia worked, the man I had seen in her photos from events, the one she had mentioned in passing as someone who understood modern relationships. His photo showed him in a gym shirt, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the camera. Talia laughed and told her friends that the universe clearly wanted to play, because it had placed her coworker in front of her like that. Someone told her to swipe right to prove that she was truly free. She glanced back at me once, as if to say that this was my test, then swiped right. A second later, the app flashed that it was a match. Her friends cheered, raising their drinks. One of them told her to message him, another said that this was better than any show. I sat there, feeling the world tilt slightly, and understood that whatever this was, it did not feel like a joke to me anymore. I did not grab the phone or walk out. Instead, I slid gently from under her, told her in a low, steady voice that I needed some air, and stepped away from the table. I made my way through the crowd to the smoking patio at the side of the club, a small concrete balcony with a low wall and a view of the street below. Out there, the music was softer, the air cooler, and the night felt more like something I recognized. I leaned on the wall, took my phone from my pocket, and opened the camera. Through the glass of the club door, I could see Talia at the high table, her phone held high as she showed something to her friends, their faces lit by the screen. I recorded a few seconds, not in a long, obvious shot, but in short clips that caught the context. Her laughing with the Tinder screen visible, her friends cheering, the general noise of the bar around them. When I stopped recording, I opened my gallery and pressed the button to back up the clips to my cloud storage. A small message appeared at the top of the screen saying that the file had uploaded successfully, then disappeared again, leaving only the thumbnails. I opened the Notes app and scrolled to the document I had titled Statement. Under the last entry, I added a new line, Club, Talia swiping Tinder in front of friends, matching with coworker Jack's, friends filming, witnesses. I wrote the date, the approximate time, and a short note that I had saved video. My fingers moved calmly, even though my chest felt tight. After a few minutes, the patio door opened and a wave of noise spilled out. Talia stepped outside, shivering slightly in the cooler air, arms wrapped around herself. She asked why I was sulking, why I had left in the middle of her social experiment, and said that I was making her look bad in front of her friends by acting like some strict guardian. I answered in a quiet, level tone that it was hard to enjoy an evening where my relationship was treated like a live show, that matching with a coworker in front of me did not feel like research, it felt like disrespect. She said I was twisting everything again, that I should be proud she was brave enough to be honest about her desires instead of sneaking around. She called me old-minded and told me that if I wanted to keep her, I needed to stop acting like I could own her phone. I did not raise my voice or argue about each word. I only said that respect was not ownership and that there were lines you did not cross if you cared about the person on the other end of the couch. She muttered that she could not talk to me when I was in this mood and went back inside, letting the door swing shut behind her. I stayed there a while longer, listening to the muffled bass, watching the lights flicker through the glass. Eventually, I left the patio, walked down the stairs instead of taking the crowded elevator, and stepped out into the street. Across the road, the bus terminal waiting area glowed under harsh lights. Through the wide glass windows, I saw Talia and Jax a little later, standing near a snack machine with one of her friends who was waiting for a bus. They stood close, bodies tilted toward each other in the posture of people who shared a private joke. Talia raised her phone, showed him something on the screen, and he laughed, leaning his shoulder into hers. I stopped on the sidewalk for a moment, just long enough to see them, then forced myself to turn away and keep walking. As I reached the corner, my phone buzzed in my hand, a sharp vibration against my palm. I glanced down and saw the screen light up. At the top, in the small notification bar, a new message preview appeared from the contact with the lock emoji, the same one who had suggested the meeting at Riverfront Cafe. The first line of the message said that we would need all of that footage, that it was important, and asked if I could meet sometime this week. I read the preview without opening the full conversation, the club lights still flickering faintly behind me, and I stood there for a moment with the phone in my hand, knowing that this night, like the couch and the supermarket line, would not just fade away now, but would become another line in the quiet record I was building. A week after the club, Talia told me that her parents wanted to have a big family dinner for Noah's birthday at a casual restaurant across town, the kind with long tables, noisy air, and children's menus printed with games. She said that it would be good for me to show I was not sulking, that her family wanted to see we were fine, and that Noah deserved a happy night. I agreed, because he did, and because I wanted to see with my own eyes how far the story about my jealousy had traveled beyond our apartment. When we arrived, the long table was already half full. Marla sat near the head, talking loudly, with Dennis beside her, quiet as always. A couple of Talia's cousins were clustered near the middle, and at the far end sat Erin, scrolling her phone in a tired way from a long shift at the hospital. Balloons were tied to a chair for Noah, and a small stack of wrapped gifts waited by the wall. As we walked in, everyone greeted Noah with cheerful energy. They hugged him, asked about his school projects, and told him that 7 was a big age. When they turned to me, their smiles were still there, but thinner, like they were shaking hands with the lead character in a story they had already heard too much about. We took our seats, with Noah between Talia and me, and for a while the conversation stayed on safe topics. People asked about work, about Aaron's long hours, about Dennis's hardware store. The server brought drinks and appetizers, and Noah told everyone about his favorite subject at school. I let myself breathe a little easier. Then one of Talia's cousins, a man who enjoyed gossip more than he enjoyed food, asked in a playful tone if the famous Tinder experiment was still going on. He said he had seen a hilarious video online about a boyfriend who could not handle his girl swiping in front of him, and he glanced at me with the grin of someone who thought we were all in on the same joke. Talia laughed and said that the experiment was very much ongoing, that she was just trying to help me grow out of my old beliefs about possession, and that I was taking a long time to evolve. Marla jumped on the line and told the table that she was proud of her daughter for refusing to be chained, that her generation had been taught to hand over their freedom too easily, and that it was good to see Talia push against those old rules. My name came up more times than I would have liked. Marla told the cousins that I acted like Tinder was a weapon, that I behaved as if a few swipes meant the end of my worth. She said that men like me needed to understand that women had eyes and options, whether they liked it or not. Talia nodded along, adding that she was simply being honest about desire, that hiding it would be the real betrayal. Someone at the table said that any man who panicked over an app was not ready for a real woman. Several heads nodded, and a small ripple of approving laughter moved along the benches. I sat there, my hands around my glass of water, and felt the familiar pressure in my chest. When there was a small gap in the noise, I said in a calm tone that, to me, the issue was not curiosity, but respect, that there was a difference between noticing the world and turning your relationship into a public test of loyalty. I added that being used as content in videos and group chats did not feel like honesty, it felt like humiliation. Marla waved her hand and said that sounded like something from a manual written decades ago, that love today looked different and that I needed to stop taking everything so personally. She told me that as long as Talia came home to me, I had nothing to complain about. Talia smiled in a way that was half apology and half pride, and said that she could not shrink herself just because her partner did not like seeing how many people were interested in her. Dennis watched his plate, picking at his food, and said nothing. Aaron frowned slightly and glanced from Talia to me, her eyes tight with concern, but she stayed quiet too, as if not sure whether it was her place to step in. When the main dishes arrived, the conversation slid to lighter topics for a while, and Noah seemed to relax, focused on his burger and the attention. After we ate, the server brought out a small cake with candles, and everyone sang. For a few minutes, Noah's face lit up in a way that made the rest of the room fade. He blew out the candles, and the adults cheered. Then, as if sunlight had passed behind a cloud, Marla set her glass down and said she wanted to make a short toast. She stood and announced that she wanted to celebrate modern women who refused to let insecure men control their joy, and she said she hoped Noah would grow up knowing that his mother was strong enough to demand freedom. People clinked glasses. Noah looked from her to Talia to me, confusion flickering across his face. I did not raise my glass. I simply kept my hand on the table and watched the bubbles in my water. After the dinner, when the bills were paid and the gifts packed into a bag, I suggested that I take Noah to the park behind the restaurant for a little while before we headed home. Talia said that she wanted to stay a bit longer and talk with her parents and cousins about a promotion she was planning for the studio, and she added that Noah would enjoy the fresh air more than listening to adults. Aaron said she would walk with us for a few minutes, needing a break from the noise. The park was a small rectangle of trees and grass with a playground at one end and a few benches along a path. The sky had turned a deep blue, and the streetlights were starting to flick on. Noah ran to the swings, then the slide, while Aaron and I sat on a bench, watching him. She said, in a low voice, that she did not like how her mother talked about me, that the jokes had gone too far, that Noah was not stupid. She asked if I was keeping track of what was happening, not in a nosy way, but in a practical one, as if she knew that memory could fail under pressure. I told her that I was writing things down, that I had started organizing what I could not say out loud, and that I would not let this become only Talia's story. After a few minutes, Aaron's phone buzzed with a message from the hospital, and she had to leave for an early shift the next morning. She gave Noah a hug, squeezed my shoulder once in silent support, and went back toward the restaurant. Noah came to sit beside me on the bench, his shoes still dusty from the playground. For a while, he kicked his feet and watched the other children. Then he asked in a small voice if it was true that his mother was using her phone to find someone better than me. He said that he had heard Marla joke about Talia trading up, and that some cousin had told him his mom was too pretty to stay with one person. He wanted to know if the app on her phone meant she was looking for a new dad. The question went through me like a slow knife. I told him that phones did not decide who his father was, that I would always be his dad, and that none of this confusion was his fault. I explained, in simple words, that some adults played selfish games and tried to call them fun, and that sometimes they forgot children were listening. I did not speak badly about Talia. I only told him that I was paying attention and that I would make sure he stayed safe and loved no matter what adults did with their apps. Later that night, after we drove home and Noah fell asleep with his new toys arranged around him, I walked down the apartment hallway and looked at the wall planner near the kitchen. A date 2 weeks ahead was already circled in red, a small ring I had drawn a few days earlier after a late-night text from the lock emoji contact. Above my desk in the corner of the living room, the sticky note that said, "Bring forms," waited like a quiet instruction. Talia sat on the couch with her phone, laughing at something on her screen, and when I came in, she asked if I had enjoyed my performance as the jealous man at dinner. She said that I had made her look like a saint by sitting there so stiff, proving her point about traditional men. I answered in a calm voice that I had not performed anything, that I had simply chosen not to add more fuel to a fire that already had a child standing too close. She rolled her eyes and said I was trying to make her feel guilty for having fun. I walked to our bedroom, took my pillow and a folded blanket from the bed, and carried them to the small guest room at the end of the hall. Talia followed, stood in the doorway, and asked if this was my big gesture, turning the guest bed into punishment. I told her that I needed space to think, that I did not feel comfortable sharing a bed with someone who used me as content and called it research. She said my choice proved I was dramatic, that sleeping apart would only make it easier for her to live how she wanted. I did not answer. I made the guest bed, smoothing the sheets, then sat at the little desk. The thin binder labeled household and the ones labeled utilities and bank sat on the shelf above, slightly thicker now, their edges worn where my fingers had turned them. I checked that they were in order, then put them back in a neat row. On my laptop, I opened the statement document, added a new entry about the family dinner, the toast to modern women, and Noah's question in the park. I saved the file into Archive A, watching the brief flicker of the icon. As I finished, I went to Noah's room to look in on him. He slept with one arm over his stuffed dinosaur, his face soft and peaceful in a way it never looked during adult conversations. I stood there for a moment, then eased the door almost shut. As the latch clicked into place, my phone buzzed lightly in my pocket. When I pulled it out, the screen showed a missed call from a number marked only as private and a text preview from Marla that I did not open yet. The first line saying she hoped I understood that men who tried to use rules against her daughter always lost. I let the preview fade, slipped the phone back into my pocket, and walked down the hallway toward the guest room, the red circled date on the planner catching my eye like a small, steady light in the dimness. The morning of the red circled date, I woke up before the alarm in the guest room, staring at the cracks in the ceiling and listening to the distant sound of running water from the bathroom. Talia was already awake, moving through the apartment with the light, quick steps of someone getting ready for a day they believed was theirs to shape. I lay there for a few minutes, feeling the thin mattress under my back, then swung my legs over the side of the bed and sat up. The small room smelled faintly of dust and fabric softener. On the wall above the desk, the sticky note that said, "Bring forms," waited like a small, quiet voice I could no longer ignore. I folded the blanket, straightened the pillow, and treated those simple tasks as a way to steady my hands. In the hallway, the wall planner caught my eye. The date I had circled in red looked strange in the morning light, both too faint and too loud. I touched the circle with my fingertip, just once, like pressing a seal. In the kitchen, Talia sat at the table in her workout leggings, hair tied up, phone in hand. She looked up as I entered and told me, without greeting, that Marla had a feeling I was planning something, that she had warned Talia not to let me use systems or rules to punish her for needing more than one source of attention. I poured myself coffee and asked what punish meant in this context. Talia said that if I talked to anyone about our relationship outside the family, if I tried to make her look unstable, it would prove she had been right about me all along. Her voice shook slightly when she said it, anger wrapped around fear. I answered in a calm tone that I had not done anything to her, that I had been on the receiving end of her experiments for months, that I was only finished pretending they were harmless. She said I was being cryptic, that this new quiet version of me scared her more than the old one who argued. I didn't respond to that. I told her I needed to be at a personal meeting before work, that I would pick Noah up from school as usual, and that I didn't want to argue about it over coffee. She called after me as I took my mug and bag, saying that secret meetings were exactly how controlling men started, but the front door closed quietly between us before the words could stick. Outside, the air was cold and clear. As I walked to the car, my phone buzzed with a soft reminder. On the screen, a calendar alert popped up. Meeting, Personal, Harbor Cafe. 10:30 a.m. I dismissed it and drove toward the co-working space I had booked online, telling the office that I needed a block of time for planning. The co-working building was calm, with soft music playing at the reception desk and the smell of coffee and printer toner mixing in the air. I chose a small table near the window, plugged in my laptop, and set my bag on the floor. From the bag, I pulled out the thin binders labeled household, utilities, and bank, laying them in a row beside the computer. They looked like ordinary files, the kind every adult is supposed to keep, but I knew now that they were more than that. They were a skeleton of my life. On the desktop, 2 folders waited, Archive A and Archive B. Archive A held the raw pieces, screenshots, messages, short clips, written notes. Archive B was newer, more organized, a place for summaries and copies. I opened Archive A first, scanning the file names. Couch swiping, TikTok HR, Club Match Jacks, Family Dinner Toast, Park Question Noah. Each one represented a night when I had swallowed my anger and sharpened my memory instead. I clicked through them, making sure each image and video still worked, then copied the most important files into Archive B, renaming them with clear dates and locations. I opened Statement Doc and read it from the beginning, as if it were someone else's story. Lines about a girlfriend swiping on Tinder in front of her partner looked simple on the screen, but I knew how heavy they felt in a human chest. I added more detail about the birthday dinner, Marla's toast, Aaron's quiet concern, Noah's question about new dads. I kept my language plain. No adjectives that could be called dramatic, only facts. Who, what, when, where. At the table behind me, a printer started up, feeding sheets through with a low hum. The smell of toner drifted closer. I heard a soft slap as a single blank page fell on top of someone else's stack, useless and white. For a moment, I imagined sliding a blank page across to Talia and telling her this was what she wanted my story to be. Nothing written, nothing recorded, nothing real. Then I closed that thought and focused on the laptop. From my bag, I took a small USB stick I had labeled with today's date in careful letters. I plugged it into the side of the computer and copied both archive folders and the statement document onto it, watching the small progress bar crawl across the screen. When it finished, a Cloud Sync pop-up blinked at the top. File uploaded successfully. I saved that tiny confirmation in my mind as much as on the screen. Then I ejected the USB, held it for a moment between my fingers, and slipped it into a plain envelope I had brought. I wrote nothing on the outside. The envelope looked like any other piece of paper in any other adult's life. Later in the morning, I walked to the hospital where Erin worked. We had agreed, in a short text, to meet in the cafeteria on her break. The hospital cafeteria was bright and clean, with big windows and the constant sound of trays and low conversations. Erin sat at a corner table with a cup of coffee, still in her scrubs. She looked tired, but when she saw me, her face softened. She asked how I was holding up, not with polite words, but with the serious eyes of someone who had seen people break under smaller loads. I told her simply that I was tired of being turned into a punchline, that I was worried about Noah more than myself, that I was done pretending this was just a phase. She said that she believed me, that she had seen enough to know the problem wasn't my imagination. She said that if I decided to take formal steps, whatever that meant, she would not stand on Talia's side just because they shared blood. She also said that Noah needed predictability more than a cool mother on an app. I nodded, thanked her, and that was all we needed to say. In the afternoon, after a short and careful conversation with Ms. Patel about containing online spillover and protecting boundaries, I walked alone to the office parking garage instead of going straight home. I sat in the car with the engine off, the dim light around me only broken by the glow of my phone screen. The message thread titled Follow Up showed a new unread dot. I tapped it and read the latest line from the lock emoji contact, a simple reminder of times and steps, no heavy language. It was practical and dry. I read it twice, then closed the thread without typing a reply right there in the garage, aware of cameras watching the lanes. I took the plain envelope out of my bag, held it again, then put it back and drove home. The apartment smelled like takeout when I opened the door. Talia was on the couch, legs crossed, phone in hand, a show playing in the background. She looked up, narrowed her eyes, and asked if I had enjoyed my mysterious errands. She said that Marla was sure I was trying to build a case, that only a coward tried to win with paperwork instead of passion. I hung my coat, placed my keys in the bowl by the door, and told her that I had spent the day organizing my thoughts because shouting had not gotten us anywhere. I said that I was no longer willing to be the center of her social experiments, and that I would not argue with her in front of Noah or her family again. She asked if that meant I was leaving, if I was going to run away and tell some story about her to strangers. I said that whatever I did next, I would do it properly. No more half fights in supermarkets, no more arguments at family tables, no more surprise TikToks. Later that night, in the guest room, I closed the door and turned the lock gently. I took the envelope with the USB from my bag, opened the desk drawer, lifted the folder labeled taxes, and slid the envelope under it. Then I closed the drawer and turned the small key until I heard the soft, final click. Above me, the binders marked household, utilities, and bank sat in a clean row. I looked at them for a moment, then sat down on the edge of the bed. A knock sounded on the door, and before I could answer, Talia opened it and stepped inside, arms folded. She demanded again to know what I was planning, said that if I had any courage, I would say it to her face instead of hiding behind my calm act. I looked at her and felt a strange stillness. I told her, in a steady voice, that I was finished begging her to see me as more than a prop, that I was done fighting over an app, and that I would handle everything that came next properly through the right channels, not through scenes and games. I said I would not insult her, I would not break anything, and I would not disappear from Noah's life, but I was also not going to keep living like a test subject. As I spoke, my phone vibrated softly on the desk, the screen lighting up with a scheduled alarm I had almost pushed from my mind. The words paper drop 9:15 a.m. shown in simple letters, the location tag reading courthouse lobby. Talia saw my eyes flick toward the glow and demanded to know what that meant. I reached over, turned off the alarm with one thumb, set the phone down beside the sticky note that still read bring forms, and repeated in the same calm tone that I would handle it properly. Then I reached for the light switch. The room slipped into darkness, leaving her standing in the doorway with my words and the faint memory of that alarm between us. The courthouse lobby was bright and cold as I stood near the security line, hands empty, watching people move through with folders and nerves. At 9:15, just as my silent alarm would have gone off, Talia walked in with Marla and Dennis, talking fast about fixing my jealousy. A clerk directed them toward me. Before anyone could start a speech, a process server in a plain blazer stepped forward, confirmed Talia's name, and handed her a thick envelope. She unfolded the petition for dissolution of marriage and the temporary custody and financial orders while the lobby bell chimed.